Hello and welcome. My name is Harrison Greenbaum, and welcome to a conversation with Mad Magazine's usual gang of idiots, presented by the National Comedy Center, the nation's official cultural institution dedicated to the art of comedy, located in Jamestown, New York. The Comedy Center's new Laugh Safe health and safety program will keep you laughing safely and worry-free, so please come visit. There are no excuses not to now. And you can also support the nonprofit National Comedy Center and its mission during this challenging time by making a donation, becoming a member. Any amount is greatly appreciated. You can check us out at NTL Comedy Center on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me at Harrison Comedy on Twitter and Instagram. But let's get to the program. I am so excited. Back in 2005, I was a freshman in college, and everybody was doing fancy internships. And I somehow landed the internship of a lifetime, Mad Magazine, a magazine that I knew because my dad used to read it, and he had hidden his magazines in a box in my grandmother's closet. And every time I visited, I would sneak away and read those. And I didn't sometimes even know what TV shows or movies they were parodying because I was a young kid, but it warped my mind. It broke me. And I very proudly became an intern. Here's a picture from those days. Look how young and thin and cross-eyed I was back then. That was me as an intern 15 years ago. Can you believe it was 15 years? This is my office. That is a Lance Bass poster. Read into it what you will. And also there was a very important photo on the desk, which was Shaquille O'Neal playing Steel in one of the greatest movies DC Comics had ever released at that moment. And now having seen what they have released since then, still to this day. But Mad Magazine is a seminal piece of literature, I think. It has affected comedy in its entire history. It was founded in the 50s, made it all the way to the late 2010s. And I'm so excited to bring on the staff that made magazine what it was. Get excited from your apartment and home. Make some noise. Let's start with our first person. He's the editor-in-chief of Mad Magazine. Worked there for over 30 years. Give it up for John Ficarra, everybody. John Ficarra, how you doing?
Oh, I can hear the clapping across the country.
Very loud. I think it might be for the healthcare workers, but we'll take it.
Exactly. Yeah. I take care of myself. What is that? Nothing.
Well, yeah. I mean, you still look not a day older than this photo.
You know, I hate you. I hate you in so many ways right now. It's really, I was a cute baby, wasn't I? Swell boy.
That's a very cute baby.
Yeah. Look at those cheeks. Come on. I still have those thighs. Yeah.
Well, take us back to you were a reader of Mad Magazine, and then you were their first hire, I think, in 24 years. So take us back to that moment.
Well, I had been trying to write for Mad since I was in grammar school, and I was always getting this stock rejection letters, and I just kept at it. When I was in college, I started getting encouraging notes from Nick Megley, who was then the associate editor with Jerry DeFuscio. And he flushed me out of what we call lovingly the slush pile, which is unsolicited manuscripts. And back in those days, Mad would get, maybe a couple hundred a month. And Nick would just write encouraging notes. And then one day he wrote me a note and said, "Oh, we like this idea." Oh, there's Nick. Yeah. "We like this idea. Try fleshing it out." And I fleshed it out, and that became my first sale. And then from there it became my second and third. This was in the late 70s. And then one day I was up at the Mad offices, one of my very first times up there, dropping off a script. And Nick said to me, "We may have an opening soon. Would you be interested in editing?" I mean, you could have knocked me over the feather because, like you said, nobody left Mad or was hired by Mad forever. Even among the freelance staff, it was very solid, sort of just closed out shop. So I said, "Yeah." And then I didn't hear anything for a while. I called Nick. He said, "Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, blah, blah, blah." And then one day he called me out of the blue. And he said, it was at 10 o'clock in the morning, and he called. And he said, "Yeah, we want you to come in for an interview." I said, "Wow." I said, "All right, I'll come in tomorrow." He said, "Okay." And then he called me back about a half hour later and said, "Can you come in today?" I said, "Let me check my calendar." Yes. Because I'm sitting home, trying to make it as a freelance writer, still living with my mother in, her apartment. So, and then I met Feldstein that day and Bill. Well, I had met Bill before. And I met Feldstein, and I started that day.
And your job was the job right before that the Nickel Factory?
Oh God, yeah, well, I worked at the International Nickel Company. One of my highlights.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
very lofty.
Well, you know what? I started when I was a sophomore in high school, and it was 4 hours a day, and I'd take the Staten Island ferry over after work, and work until from 2:30 to 6:30, and then come home. But I was making $2.25 an hour, so you can't pass up money like that. But it was great, and they treated me well. They gave me health benefits. In the summer, they let me work full time, and I worked there all through college. And then after college, they put me on their sales and promotion department. And let me tell you, there's nothing quite as scintillating as writing copy about nickel. And they laid off 4,000 people, and fortunately, I was one of them. And then the next 3 years, it was the typical scraping, writing for stand-ups, writing for radio, writing for anybody who had money. Until Mad came along, and then that really started me on the path to ruin.
Well, and one of the people that you hired was a young team that had been writing for the National Lampoon. I believe this is a photo of you, and I think you have a very clear judgment of that hat.
Oh, God. Yes. Mr. Joe Raiola.
Thank God you had better taste in writers than this writer had in hats. Let's bring him on. It's Joe Raiola, everybody. How you doing?
Where did you get that photo? Where did you get that hat?
I think that's your hat. You might have stolen it from baby Ficarra.
I deny any responsibility for that hat. I believe it was photoshopped on my head.
Actually, that was taken not that long ago in my house. I recognize my house. Oh.
I've never seen that hat before in my life. I'm sorry.
You get it blocked, Joe.
Well, Joe, you were working with Charlie, and how did you end up a part of the MAD crew?
My great buddy and comedy writing pal Charlie Cato and I have been working together since high school and performing together through college. And in 1984, we started working with National Lampoon alumni. Jerry Taylor, who'd published Lampoon, had a company called Taylor Shane, TSM. And they were, back then, if you could believe it, let you know how different era this was. There was actually, you could market standalone magazine parodies and they would sell. And they had done one called, they did a parody of Playboy with Bo Derek on the cover, famously with the centerfold model was Princess Di. And they were working on a new one, a parody of Cosmopolitan called Cosmo Parody. And Charlie and I got hired as editors on that project, with featured Joan Rivers on the cover. And a lot of the famous Lampoon guys, Tony Hendra and Sean Kelly, were involved in that. And it was around then that Charlie and I both saw a different ad that MAD was looking for writers that I guess John has placed. And Charlie saw one of the ads in the New York Times, and I think I saw one in the Village Voice. And we just put a package together for MAD. And John was foolish enough to actually write back and say, I like some of the stuff, keep writing. And we submitted some stuff, and we actually sold on our first time out. And we started writing for MAD. And then, as luck would have it, Al Feldstein, who had been at MAD since, 1957, actually it goes back earlier than that, because he was with EC Comics. After 28 years, Feldstein was retiring as an editor, which opened up a slot on the bottom end of the editorial rung. So John got kicked upstairs, and Charlie and I joined on the bottom end of the rung. And so after John, we were the first hire in all those years, and we ended up staying there for the next 33 years.
And let's round out this crew. There was a cover done by a young artist. This one, it was a very low-selling issue. He did not work for MAD for another few years. But then all of a sudden, Sam Viviano not only became a regular artist with MAD Magazine, but became the art director. So let's talk about Sam, everybody. There's Sam Viviano. How you doing?
Hello.
Tell us a little bit about how you ended up. I know this was your first cover, which it's got to be an intense assignment to go straight for the cover.
Oh, well, you betcha. I moved to New York right out of college at the University of Michigan in late 1975, and I started pounding the pavement in 1976, and not having any idea. I wanted to be a famous illustrator, and I didn't even know how to start, but I got a book that had people you could see, and I would, and they kept saying, you should go to MAD. You should go to MAD. You should go to MAD. I mean, I kept hearing this, so I said, well, maybe I better go to MAD. So I called up John Putnam, the art director, and I said, I'd like to show you my portfolio. And he said, well, I got to be honest with you, it's a closed shop. We have Mort Drucker and George Woodbridge and Don Martin and Al Jaffe and we don't need anybody else. But if you want to pay us a social visit, by all means, come on over. So I did. This is early in 1976, and Putnam was very nice to me. Nick Meglin was very nice to me. Lenny Brenner was not very nice to me, but that was because it was Lenny Brenner. And they said, well, things haven't changed since I talked to you on the phone yesterday. We're still a closed shop. We still don't need you, but it was nice to meet you. Thanks a lot. So over the next few years, I kind of kept in touch. I'd stop by the office every now and then. I crossed paths with Nick Meglin quite a bit because he was always the moderator of panel discussions that I would attend. And finally, in 1980, shortly after the event that Joe was talking about, that John and Nick were brought up to be co-editors. That John was hired. This is 1980. I got a call from Feldstein saying, do you want to do a cover? Well, I'm 27 years old. I'm still getting my feet wet in the business. And I said, no, I'll wait a while. Of course, I said, sure, I'll do it. So you could see what it was. A simple idea. And Feldstein gave me a little tiny thumbnail that he had drawn on a piece of yellow notepaper. And it was just the head of J.R. Ewing from Dallas with a gun on one side and going through his ears, the flag on the other side. And he said, and make sure it's a six-fingered hand. Now, being a new guy, I mean, I'd read Mad, but I never really paid so much attention. I knew that the six-fingered hand was a thing. I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard of. But, So
we thought the stupidest thing was Feldstein giving you a cover.
Well,
no, I was going to say,
but I digress.
Yeah.
But to further what you were saying, Harrison, I was so nervous about this that I did the entire illustration twice up, and I looked at it and I just hated it. It was, I felt like, you had a big 10-gallon hat. I felt like I was painting hat for like an hour and a half. I didn't really like it a whole lot, so I did the whole thing over at a smaller scale, and that's the one that appeared on the cover. And as you pointed out, as far as I know, from the standards of 1981 when the issue came out, it didn't sell particularly well. All I know is I didn't get another call from Feldstein. I didn't get another call from Mad until after he retired, and then John and Nick took over in 84, right, John?
Yes, in very late 84.
Right. And so it shows how much they liked my work that 4 years went by between my first and second job.
Well, we alluded to him. Obviously, no talk about Mad would not be complete without talking about William Gaines, who was a very eccentric fellow, to put it mildly. I know you guys all have your stories. Joe, I believe you have a hot dog related story that might sum up Will pretty well.
Someone tip you off to the hot dog story, huh? Actually, there are several hot dog stories. There are several hot dog stories off the. I've been a vegetarian for a long time, and Gaines was a legendary meat eater. In fact, Bill would eat animals while they were still walking if he possibly could. And I decided, this is very early on in my days of Mad, that I was going to have a dog off.
John, tell this is a good story, but the other one is when he sends you to buy.
You want the other hot dog story? There are several hot dog
that's
stories.
a great hot dog story.
I'm so sorry. I should have been more specific about which.
You should have been more specific about your meat story. That's exactly right, because I can fill the whole hour here with meat stories. Gaines calls me into the office. This is the story John wants to hear. Gaines calls me into his office. He says, "Look, I want you to go down on the corner. Mad was on 53rd and Madison Avenue. Go down on the corner to the Sabrett guy on the corner, and I want you to get me 2 hot dogs with the works." So I say to Gaines, "Look, you don't want me to do that." He said, "What do you mean I don't want you to do that? Why don't I want you to do that?" And I said, "Because you're a man of principle. You're a man of integrity. You appeared before the United States Senate in the 1950s to stand up for the First Amendment and protest comic book censorship. Therefore, you respect other men of integrity. You know I'm a vegetarian. And you know that it would be against my principles to go downstairs and buy you hot dogs. You don't want me to do that. And he says to me, wrong. In fact, you are the only person as the office vegetarian that I could trust to go downstairs, get me the hot dogs, and not eat them on the way back. So Gaines was like a bizarro Mr. Spock. His logic was impeccable. You could never win an argument with Gaines. No one could. So I had no answer to that. So I go downstairs. It's weird. I'm on the line, the vegetarian on the hot dog line. This is before the era of not dogs, and tofu pups. I get the hot dogs. I bring him back to Gaines. I put the hot dogs on his desk, and I start to leave. And he goes, wait, it was one more thing. He goes, I want you to get me a glass of Diet Orange soda. Now, in the next office, Gaines had a refrigerator and then had a big freezer. And in the freezer, he kept 24-ounce plastic Flintstone cups. And the 16 ounces would be water. It would freeze. So it would be a big ice cube in the bottom of this Flintstone cup. He liked really cold soda. And he wanted me to get him big bottles of Diet Orange soda in the refrigerator. And I said, look, Bill, I draw the line at the Diet Orange soda. In fact, this was true. It's an article in today's paper, the New York Times, about the Fizz Biz. And it says that soda is one of the worst things for you. And in fact, diet soda is one of the worst things for you. And in fact, this article singles out Diet Orange soda. There's an ingredient in it that eats away at your gallbladder. And Gaines, without missing a beat, retorts, I don't give a fuck. They took my gallbladder out in 1954. Get me a Diet Orange soda. And that was Gaines. That perfectly sums up who he was. He was, there's a kind of mythology that's come out that's, about Bill that's evolved as a kind of jolly old Saint Nick or, he was crazy. He was genuinely out of his mind. And that set the tone for everything that Mad was.
And John, can you pull that photo back? I'd like to identify who's in that photo for everybody.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Because some of these names, that's Al Jaffe all the way to the left, then George Woodbridge, then Bill, then Dick DiBartolo, and then all the way to the right is Don Martin.
Wow. There's a photo of you and Bill, and it's on a very noteworthy Bahamas cruise. I believe there was a prank that occurred on that trip that was the stuff of legend.
Yes, that's me and Bill, and that was on a cruise to Bermuda, I guess it was about 1990. Joe, you didn't go.
91.
1990, 91, yeah. When I became the editor of Mad, Nick said to me, listen, if you want to write for the magazine, you shouldn't do it under your own name. It's just not right. So I said, all right. So I started writing under the name of Jay Preddy, which was my mother's maiden name. And we had another former intern, one of my first, Andrew Schwartzberg, who then came on staff. And one night I was writing an article at home, and I decided I would put a cover letter on the article. And Andrew has no idea that I'm Jay Preddy, I should say that. And I put a cover letter to myself, to John, right? Absolutely excoriate myself. I don't know what I'm doing as an editor. You're probably going to reject this because you don't know good comedy, blah, 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 blah. Even though I'm the editor, my articles, like everybody else's, went around the round table. Some got shot down, some got published, some got changed, whatever. So I just put that in the pile. So the next day, Andrew comes in, he said, did you read this letter? I said, what? I can't believe you even deal with Preddy. Look at what he wrote you about. I said, that's Preddy. He's a cranky guy, but he's a very talented guy. This starts it. So now whenever I'm sending something in, I'm putting in one letter after the other, just getting worse and worse and worse. Andrew is incredulous. that I would work with this guy. So now Bill announces the staff is going on a trip to Bermuda. So I don't know if it was my idea. I forget whose idea it was. We said, you know what? We're going to tell Andrew that Freddie's going to be on the trip. And we're tipping off the other 40 mad people on the cruise. So they're all going to be in on this gag except Andrew. So whenever Andrew comes, you see Freddie was just here. Where did he go? You know? So we set him up so perfectly. And we're going to digress for 1 second because this was not a good trip for Andrew. He roomed with Nick. The first night, Andrew comes out of the bathroom and Nick has on his bed a stuffed sheep and a bottle of Vaseline. So anyway, so we do this whole cruise to Bermuda and Andrew just keeps missing Freddie. And he's literally, he can't believe it. He's missing Freddie. So now, that night that it was taken was the cruise threw us a cocktail party because we were leaving Bermuda. And we had set up that Freddie had an aunt in Bermuda. So we give one of the ship people a note to deliver to Bill that he reads publicly, and it's from the captain that he just got a message from Freddie that he missed the boat. At which point, Bill throws a huge fit, just a huge fit. And Andrew was like, I can't believe Freddie did that. And he's going on and on and on. We kept this going for, what about, Joe, 6, 7 years? We felt sorry for him. And then one day, Freddie, who worked in the stockroom, felt so bad for Andrew, we tipped it. But it was one of the longest running mad pranks.
I also heard you sent a lot of people into Bill Gaines's stateroom one night, just one after the other.
Sam, were you on this trip? You could tell the story if you were. This was Dick DiBartolo's idea. Bill had the biggest stateroom on the ship because Bill was a big guy. And Dick said, you know what would be funny is if we recreated the scene from Night at the Opera where 2 people come in and then 2 more, and then the woman with the vacuum comes in and people with hard-boiled eggs, and it just gets to there's people everywhere, and Groucho was literally crowd surfing over them. So we set the whole thing up, and Bill sitting there, first person comes in, hey, Bill. Bill's sitting there in his underwear because he is Bill. And it just grew and grew. There's footage of this. Jack Davis shot it. It grew and grew, and we had the cleaning people in with a vacuum cleaner and everything. And Bill said it was one of the great highlights of the bad trip.
Oh, that's amazing.
There was a moment. One of the people we got was a woman who was on the cruise. She didn't work there. She had no idea who Bill was. But we said, just run in and tell him you're his biggest fan. And so we already have about 20 people in there. And she just burst in. This little short, round lady runs up to him and says, I'm your biggest fan. I'm your biggest fan.
And Sam, I'd read that you would join the staff of MAD, but that you didn't feel like you were really part of the usual gang of idiots until I think it was Switzerland.
Who was that to?
Sam.
Okay. Well, I was a freelancer, and all the artists are freelancers, but I always referred to myself as the first of the new guys because up until around 1980. They had a pretty solid set staff of freelancers, that closed shop I talked about. And I was getting work, but I felt, look, this is Mort Drucker and this is Jack Davis. And who the hell am I? So, I was a job and I was getting other work. I was really building up my early freelance career. But MAD was nothing like any other client. And a lot of that was due to Nick Meglin because Nick didn't treat his job or anyone's job quite the way anyone else did. So, you'd walk in and instead of the nice little chit chat with the art director and editor that I was used to, he'd start grilling me about my love life, my family, where were my parents from. He'd pull a jacket out of a closet and say, I don't like what you're wearing. I want you to wear this instead. And he'd make me trade what I was wearing for that. So I was just kind of not sure about all this. What was I getting myself into? And then in 1987, So about 3 years after I really started getting work, I think it must have been John, you called me and said that somebody who was going on the trip that year had dropped out. Now, in order to be on the trips, in order to get on them, you had to do a certain amount of work in the year previous. You had to have a certain number of pages. And I wasn't quite up to that level. But apparently, Gaines said, so-and-so dropped out. I've got a ticket. John, Nick, decide who you'd like to ask, even if they don't really qualify. And I guess I won the lottery. So I went on the trip, and, it's like heaven. We're on a bus going from Paris to Giverny. And that's the trip.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
That's in Giverny, isn't it? Or
that was the restaurant we went to after Giverny.
Yeah. And where am I in that? Sergio's at the, let's see the picture again. Nick is way in the back. Sergio's in the bottom. I see Jaffe toward the left, Dave Berg way over in the far left, and Paul Coker and Bob Clark on the far right.
You're in back of Harry North in the white jacket on the right.
Oh, yeah, I am. There's Harry North in the white jacket, and I'm behind him with the very, very, very dark beard I still have. So, we're on this bus, and everybody's joking. Mostly the writers. That's the thing I noticed, that the writers were like, can you top this? Of course, I don't think anyone ever was able to top Edwin, right? But
probably not, yeah.
Right. But, between John and Nick and Edwin, they're going on it. And most of the artists are just kind of laughing at the whole thing, not having to play the game, but really enjoying it. And I realized at that point that I wasn't sitting at the kids' table. They had embraced me as part of the gang, and I belonged. And it was really a huge revelation.
But I think that this speaks to the genius and the insanity of Gaines.
Yeah.
You have to understand that mad artists and writers were all over the country. It was a freelance-driven magazine. Don Martin, Dave Berg, Sergio Aragonés, Antonio Porrillas, Stan Hart, Frank Jacobs. These guys never would have met each other if it wasn't for the fact that Gaines, who was, the quintessential eccentric millionaire, I had this idea. I mean, listen, Bill loved eating and he loved traveling. And so he got people together to eat and travel. And he assembled these people who never would have seen each other, brought them together with the editorial staff. And here's the thing, though, that even this has got to be put in context. Bill was legendarily known as cheap.
Right.
That's the thing. There you go. Bill would have a thing called Bill's Bills, a little piece of white paper. He'd walk around every month and he'd give you a bill. If you made an 18-cent phone call to your chiropractor in Scarsdale, he'd make you pay for it. He would not allow mad subscribers to subscribe with the Bill Me option. You had to pay. He was, and Mad itself was cheap, low quality, cheap, bad. Our readers are stupid. We're stupid, and yet this was undercut by this generosity of spirit, exemplified in one of the ways by these amazing trips.
That trip we went on was,
and the first trip, right, came from trying to get back the one Haitian subscriber that you guys had lost.
Yes, the first trip was to Haiti.
None of us were there for that.
Yeah. Tell it, John. Tell the story.
This is one of the classic Mitch stories that Bill decided to go on a trip, and it was to Haiti. And right before they left, he said, we used to do the subscriptions in-house. Gloria Orlando ran the subscriptions in-house. He looked up, and there was one person in Haiti who was a subscriber. So Bill rents Jeeps when they get to Haiti, and they go to this poor kid's house, and they ring the doorbell, and he opens it up, and they're all on the front porch on their knees, begging him to resubscribe, which he did. And then the following year, a second person in Haiti subscribed. So Bill, being the business genius that he was, said, see that trip? I doubled subscriptions in Haiti just by going on that trip. The nice thing is, though, 30 years later, Bill was on the old Bob Costas Later show, and he told that story. And the kid is now a lawyer, I think in San Francisco. And Bill was able to have dinner with him before he died. So it really came full circle.
But that's
Amazing.
to kind of burst the bubble. That's a wonderful story. We all know it. We've all told it many, many times. But my guess is that Bill, and Joe alluded to this, crazy like a fox. He had this group of people that the readers thought all worked together in a single room shooting spitballs at each other. And that wasn't the case. They're in California, New York, and Florida, and all over the place. And so what a brilliant idea to bring all of these towns together once every year or two for summer camp. It's really what it was.
And we're talking, the trip that we were to Giverny, we also went to Zermatt, Switzerland.
Right.
And we stayed at a Michelin hotel, just unbelievable. And Bill paid extra so we would all have balconies that overlooked the Alps. What's
Matterhorn.
Amazing.
The Matterhorn. That overlooked the Matterhorn. And our first night there was about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's phone rang. It was Bill because the clouds had just parted and you could see the Matterhorn. So everybody came out on their balcony at 5 a.m. to look at the Matterhorn. It was a great trip. Probably my favorite trip of all time.
Now, of course, we were all latter day additions to this. That was my first trip in '87. I think you both went the trip before to Sicily.
I got screwed out of the Sicily trip.
You did, okay. The trip started in 1959. And in the early years, they were just the Mad Staffers, meaning all men. And they went on safari in Kenya. They went to, didn't they go to China? They went to Hong Kong, right?
Suriname. They went to Bora Bora, Russia.
That's Tahiti. That picture.
That's Tahiti.
Yeah. One of the more famous ones, they had a trip to Mexico, and Sergio Aragonés's mother made dinner for everybody. Then they went to an arena and they did bullfighting.
There were pictures of that. Irving Schildhoff, photographer, took pictures of that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about
out on that one.
You had to sell so many pages to qualify for a trip, right? So early, and this dog, especially in the early years, Bill was very adamant about it. If you didn't sell enough pages, you couldn't go on the trip. So one day, got word that Bill's mother died, and some of the guys were talking, and they said to Arnie Kogan, "Are you going to Bill's mother's wake?" And he says, "I can't. I don't have enough pages." Became like a classic Mad story.
Well, one of the things you guys alluded to, though, as much as the freelancers are spread out all around the country and the world, you guys were meeting every day in the office, coming up with jokes, especially in the last 10 years of like the blog, the Idiotical. Walk us through sort of these office meetings. I remember as an intern, I would hear some kind of sound effect. There would be a train whistle, there would be a drum set. I knew a meeting was coming.
Yeah, I had a bunch of that stuff just to keep them energy high and flowing. Joe and Charlie had given me a snare drum and a cymbal that if somebody hit a good one, I hit a rim shot, and it was just to keep the silliness going. And we brought the interns in on the meetings. That was one of the things. One of the things I'm most proud of was starting the intern program, because we brought them in as if they were full editors and listened to what they had to say. And more often than not, they were good. And this was a different magazine from when I first started, because up until that point, the writers came up with the ideas and then just brought them to the staff. And somewhere there was a shift after Nick and I took over, and the editorial staff contributed a lot more of the gags and or even just the areas that then we would assign to writers. We want something on Madonna, and then see what they came up with. So, but when we did the Idiotical, which was, I think, one of the great times of working, man, I think Joe would feel that way too. Every morning we just started in my office, everybody, and just spitball ideas. And I rarely said, all right, we got to get back to business. I just let the conversation flow wherever it went, because frequently it led to gold. And I think Joe once said that man is the only place where you're rewarded for saying something stupid. And,
it's the only place in the country where if you mature, you get fired.
yeah.
And I used to refer to it as a comedy sweatshop as well, because to what John's talking about, I mean, this went on for a long time. We would just gather, and sometimes I got to tell you, sometimes it was not pretty. Either we were burnt out, or we did the same. We tired of our own jokes, and it just, it's, oh God, this is not funny. But we did that for a long time. In retrospect, that's a very unusual gig. We shared a comedy writer's room for over 3 decades, and particularly the last decade of that period was very different than the 20 years that went before. It was after 9/11, it was after Charlie Hebdo. It was when the news cycle had really shifted. Remember, Mad was 8 times a year originally. 8 times a year. Think about that. It's the very idea of it is absurd now. And then it ramped up to 9, 10, 11. At one point, it was 12 times a year. We didn't like that because we felt that more magazines lowered the quality, that we wouldn't have to buy as much stuff to fill 8 issues. Therefore, the quality would be better. But then we found ourselves in an everyday cycle, multiple times a day cycle when everyone could Photoshop and anyone could post a gag, and people were posting gags on the same stuff we were doing, sometimes as fast or faster than we were, and the whole game changed.
Yeah.
That was
one of the first things we did when we had an idea for the idiotical was to Google it to make sure that some kid in his basement didn't do it overnight.
Right. And there's a speed thing too in terms of your parodies and stuff, where you would be the first person to parody a movie in, say, the 70s. But by the time the magazine came out, there might have been 4 or 5 takes or more of that property.
Yeah, but movies stayed in theaters longer. Now they're in 2 weeks, and we at one point we were really trying to race to get it out when the movie came out, and I don't think the parodies were as good because we're working off scripts instead of seeing the movie. And you really can't do that because you don't know what the director cuts and what have you. And at some point, I think we just made the realization, look, we do parodies. Drucker does them usually. They're usually great. When they come out, they come out. It's what Mad does. Yeah. And we just sort of accepted it. And what happened was we strived not to be in the valley. The movie came out, and then it went away for a while, and then it came back on cable or on DVD. And we would always try to hit it. So not in the valley. We'd rather hold it and get it when the DVD is out, so then people would have a fresher reference to it. Yeah, those movie parodies are dogs. I mean, Sam has done them. At least a page a week they take, just to draw.
And Sam, you did the Marvelous Mrs Maisel one, which was a return to form. What was that like, going back to actually illustrating a full-on parody?
Well, that was very interesting because that was after we closed up shop in New York, and DC Comics moved the magazine to California. And I was not able actually for that first year to contribute to the magazine because we had separation anxiety or something. So just about a year later, I get a call saying, would you like to do this TV parody? And it had been written by Charlie Cadu, Joe's former partner and, our former colleague and, a friend, a buddy. Oh, geez, I haven't done something like that in over 20 years. The last parody I had done was a movie called a Halloween H2O.
Yeah.
One of the many late sequels. And that was in 1998. So this is 20 some years later. And really what it came down to, because it was Charlie, I wanted to do it. And it was also like a challenge. Can I still do it? And I did. Fortunately, it was cut down from 6 to 5 pages, made it a little easier. But I realized 2 things. I don't have the stamina now that I had 30 years ago, where I was literally, and John can verify this, that I would deliver jobs where I had been staying up for 3 nights straight. I'd work 36 hours without stopping to meet a deadline. I can't do that anymore. So I had to budget my time a little better, and I did the job. Now that, to me, just doing it was a great victory. Whether it was any good or not, I'll leave up to other people to say. But I did do it, and I do remember that as soon as I finished, I said, "Never again."
I think actually they ended the magazine to prevent that. I think that was the whole.
That's right.
I think that was the reason.
Yeah, well, they were talking about ending the magazine just to prevent me from doing any more work with them.
I had lunch with him a few times when he was doing that, and I don't know if I've ever seen Sam more fried or cranky than when he was doing Mrs. Maisel.
Well, it's such a fun show.
Well, if you guys have just joined us, this conversation with Mad Magazine's Usual Gang of Idiots is presented by the National Comedy Center located in Jamestown, New York. We hope you'll support the nonprofit National Comedy Center and its mission of presenting and preserving the vital story of comedy by making a donation. And speaking of the National Comedy Center, when you walk into the National Comedy Center, you get to pick things that you like, comedians, movies, and you sort of create a comedy profile. So that as you go through the museum, you're presented with humor that you might find funny. And one of the things that you can select is Mad Magazine. And I thought it's important to bring it up because Mad does have a distinct voice. And I'd love to hear how you would describe the distinct voice of Mad and what it takes to write in that distinct Mad voice.
Well, Mad's mission has always been to question authority. That everybody is lying to you, whether it's advertisers, politicians, newspapers, your parents, your teachers.
Here's what I found.
So we pretty much always started from that point of view. And the other thing is we never, ever talked down to readers. Most people thought that Mad was read by kids. In fact, it wasn't. When we were there, the average age of a Mad reader started at 19, and I think by the time we left, it was up to like 24 or 26. So, but we had very little in the 14 to 16 area. So we get kids younger, and then we lose them, and then we get them back, hopefully for life. And so we always tried to keep that voice going. And I always strived for it, especially in the intros to the articles, because I thought the introductions to the articles was the editors talking to the readers throughout the entire issue. And that's why I thought they were really important. Now, the art department used to say the intros are too long, you're screwing up the layouts. So it was a constant fight between the art department and the editorial department. And then when we started the Mad 20, Joe and I and David Shane, I think, would probably be the three people who were most responsible for this, maybe Charlie too. We developed an even snarkier voice, a more bitter voice than the normal magazine. And those took a long time to craft. I mean, we would work on those for hours just to get in a lot of information, because we also, in the Mad 20, we had to encapsulate what the event was that was so dumb that we was doing something on it in the issue. So we had to do that. We had to entertain, frequently had to educate, because people might not even known about the event. So that was a big challenge to us. Yeah, there's a Mad 20 cover that came out pretty good.
Look, at the end of the day, there are only two jokes. One joke is, look at me. What a freaking idiot. And the other joke is, look at you. What a freaking idiot. And those are the only two jokes there are. Mad was really founded on the look at me. What an idiot. John's right. Question authority was, the main tenet of Mad, more than what we worry even. But Mad also was, I think it was famous for its self-deprecating humor. It never took itself seriously. Now, Lampoon would be more in the style of, look at you. What an idiot. Lampoon didn't really have, as far as I remember, any self-deprecating voice. Over the years, I think, Mad actually the Mad voice evolved, and it began to take on more of a look at you, what an idiot. And more of that voice came into Mad. So by the time, at least I think our last 10 years at Mad was a mix of that self-deprecating humor, which was very strong, but also there was kind of an attack humor in Mad also.
But it wasn't to the reader. It was look at them.
Right.
It was
right.
politicians. It was corporate. It wasn't look at you. Yeah. It was look at them. And they deserve ridicule.
It was still self-deprecating, because before anyone could retaliate and attack us, we would attack ourselves.
Right.
Yeah, we were very good at making sure everyone knew that we didn't think much of what we were doing.
We were self-inoculated. You know?
Right. If Matt was look at me and National Lampoon was look at them or look out, then New Yorker was just adjusting its monocle and then lying back in a bed of funny.
Yeah, that's you get Bob Mankoff on for your next guest to talk about that. You know, I think of the New Yorker more in the Mad vein than the National Lampoon vein, certainly.
Well,
I remember as an intern going through the submissions, and one of the ways you would the New Yorker pile was not a pile that was looked at again.
Yeah,
but if you guys represented sort of the new Mad, as Sam mentioned, you were the second guard. There was a new Mad, a third guard, some young blood, and he's our surprise guest for the evening. Somebody I know you guys love, somebody I love as well. It's Dave Corrado, everybody.
Hey!
Surprise!
How you doing?
How you doing? Can you tell me how you got involved with this ragtag crew?
My God, you got a new toupee.
Yeah, I can swim in it. I gotta go. This has been great, though. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure.
Good
Dave
luck with
Corrado, everybody. He's great. And so what are we talking about?
Hey. Did you have was that a question for me or was that a question?
How did you end up joining, and what was that process like?
I came through the nickel factory, same as John. Modest, but in our day, the nickel factory was like the Harvard Lampoon of. It was the pipeline to come to. I interned. There I am. Near the end of things. I interned after my freshman year of college. Someone told me there was a poster up, like an internship poster up in the journalism department about internships at MAD. And I applied and got it. And it was great. I mean,
Do you remember what year that was?
98.
But Dave, you hold the record, don't you?
Yeah, the most internships, the Jordan of unpaid labor.
How many was it? 3?
Yeah, because it was at a time where like I had to get credit, so like I did it after my freshman year, and then I came back for like 2 or 3 weeks during my winter break sophomore year, just because I wanted to come back really badly, and it was great. And then I came back again the last semester of college and came in, I think 3 days a week. I was coming in from Trenton to Manhattan 3 days a week. And it was, I don't know how you felt about it, Harrison, but it's like, once I was in it, it was like you couldn't go back to, like you just wanted to go back and visit or wanted to be part of it or wanted to, it was.
People would ask me if it was like the Simpsons episode about Mad Magazine, and I was like, it was better. Like it's everything we saw in that plus more. It was like it was a magical comedy haven. It
ruined internships also.
That's true.
I don't know. I did one or two, and it was, they were like typical internships, especially like entertainment internships. It's just like you're being treated worse than worse. And this was like you were sitting in on meetings, and like they seemed happy to be there. Have you there. You were one of 2 interns. It was a really nice program that was there. So then after that, I started freelancing. I started selling articles and kind of kept coming back. And I also just wanted to like keep my face there so that if there were, it was still a closed shop. Like I got hired and Greg Lightman had been hired before me, but like, I think Shane was hired before that. It's like everyone there stays and doesn't leave. So I kind of wanted to stick around.
And with 1 or 2 exceptions, all the hires came from the intern program.
Right.
Because we knew what we had.
Yeah. Especially, Dave Shane was an intern. Andrew was an intern, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Jacob Lambert was an intern. I was an intern. And Doug was an intern. Doug Thompson was an intern.
Right.
That's right.
So,
But then,
how many years?
You know,
Are you on staff?
No, do you want to go? Go. Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
You know, Gaines in the '60s sold Mad to I think the Kinney Corporation, and then there was a series of corporate transactions and ended up with Warner Brothers and Time Warner and AOL and all that. But even while it was corporately owned, as long as Bill was there, the corporations didn't rule Mad. Bill did. Now, obviously, when Bill died, that changed a bit. But I'm just talking about the internship program and the experience you guys had. I think that Mad, even after Bill died, retained a certain independence from the corporate structure, even though it was corporately run and we had to play ball with the corporations. And John was great at that. You know, John was on both ends of it. John had to deal with upper management at Warner Brothers and the staff and the freelancers. So he was in the middle of it all. But the experience you guys had, I think, was related to the fact that Mad was never fully absorbed by what I called the Borg. That working like for DC, it was like working for the Borg. That DC's goal was to assimilate Mad fully, and they did to some degree, but they could never assimilate us fully. Even when they moved to California and they said you're gonna lose your job if you don't go, without meeting together as a group, individually, we each said no. We weren't gonna go out there and become part of that, whatever that was going to be. And I think that mentality manifested all the way down to the internship program as well.
And I credit a lot of that to Gaines as well, in the sense that he created that spirit. And even after he passed away, you had enough people who experienced it. Yourselves, obviously Nick, Lenny, so that the spirit continued on. And even without such things as the trips, which really had a great deal of power on the freelancers, I think we all worked to make that spirit continue. I mean, that was, you know, I joined the staff relatively late in '99, but that was my goal with every freelancer I worked with, to make them feel like part of the family. And you know, it paid off. It really did.
A lot of them said they felt smothered by that, Sam. They didn't want the family. They just wanted a job, Sam.
Yeah. Well, you know, sometimes that was true, but not always, you know?
They found it weird you were inviting them to Thanksgiving dinners. They found that part of it.
But I have to bring the turkey.
Family that Sam runs also.
The office/orphanage. Joe alluded to this. The sort of legacy of Mad, because Mad in the National Comedy Center is in the continuum of comedy. It's obviously a huge part of comedy history, and it's influenced so many comedians and comedy writers and movies. With what you're seeing now, where, you know, as much as Mad was saying, hey, everything you read don't believe everything you read, in a weird way, it's been taken advantage of and turned into this fake news thing. Do you think what we're seeing now is the result of Mad, or happening because of the absence of Mad?
You know, I'm very cynical on this, because I think if people listened to Mad, I don't think Trump would have ever been president. And I don't think we would have ever gone to Iraq. I mean, we were railing against this stuff. I mean, we were railing against cigarettes long before it was fashionable to do so. We did the best we could. But in the end, I think on that mission, we failed. That's one of my favorites, Charlie Cater's idea. You know, I talked to Tim Carvel, who's one of our writers, who was the head writer on The Daily Show. And I said to him, did he ever get discouraged because they were just killing Fox every night? This was during the Jon Stewart years. And Fox ratings just kept going up. And he said, no, he says, we do what we do, and they do what they do. So he took a much more benign view of it. But I would I would go home sometimes and think, oh, we really nailed them on something. And I'll tell a quick story. We did this poster when we went into the second Iraq War called Clone of the Attack. And it was a takeoff of Attack of the Clones, the Star Wars poster. And it went around the internet. This was before me. Oh, there it is. Great. And this went around the internet hundreds of times. And some people took off the Mad credit, and then people were mailing it back to me and saying, this is the type of thing Mad should be doing. So one day I'm at my desk and I get a call from the CBS White House correspondent. He says, I saw what you did. He said, it's hilarious. He said, I gave one to Condoleezza Rice. She loved it. And I just gave one to Ari Fleischer. He's literally walking it into the Oval Office to show George Bush. They love it. He thought I'd be thrilled by this. Just the opposite. I'm like, we're trying to piss him off. We're trying to enrage him. We're trying to make fun of him. We're trying to show how stupid he is. But somewhere along the lines, and I think Saturday Night Live had a lot to do with this, they realize that if they pretend they're in on the gig, they co-opt the humor. They co-opt the zing. And that's why I'm always against when Saturday Night Live, even though they get big ratings for it when they have politicians on. Because I think it weakens their argument.
Yeah, we've actually talked about this a lot, John and I wish Lorne Michaels would get the note. And it really started with Laugh-In and Nixon. It's a weird thing that the hippy-dippy culture, the anti-war comedians helped elect Nixon. And I'm sorry, Lorne Michaels owns a certain responsibility for Trump. And the only way to stop it is to stop. The politicians should hate Saturday Night Live so much that they don't want to step in the studio, that everything about it is, instead of the politicians, they're impersonators. And I'll say this, I think one of the things I'm really proud of, we went down swinging. I mean, we were defeated, but the entire comedy world was defeated by Trump. The late night guys, the Onion men, whatever stand-ups were around, we recognized Trump as a unique menace and threat. How many of our last covers, I think it was 7 out of 9 or 7 out of 10 covers or Trump covers, we were relentless in mocking Trump. And at the end of the day, it turns out voting is more important than satire.
I mean, you talked before about the idiotical and like some of those meetings being like, oh boy. After it got to a point with Trump where it was just, and even when he was running, where it was just like, we kind of had to take him out of the equation almost day to day, because otherwise every day he was saying something outrageous and stupid and harmful. And it was almost, you couldn't keep up with it, but we were also just burning out on this guy who had a bottomless supply of awful, it would be something like, oh, thank God it's Oreo's 100th birthday today. Thank fucking God.
And then Trump needed Oreo. It was screwed.
I don't know, man. I mean, he said he could beat George Washington in a fist fight. We guess we got to do something on that. You just ignore it.
And there were things that you guys did about Trump that came true. This was something that I found while I was researching it. That's Trump redoing the Mount Rushmore, which in the last couple of weeks has been something that he may or may not have floated.
Yeah. And I mean, as bad as we feel about this, I mean, you guys were fans of Spy Magazine and stuff. They had his number in 1983 and were hammering. I can't imagine what Graydon Carter's day-to-day thought process is on that guy, because Spy Magazine was just, they really had it in for him.
A short-fingered Bulgarian.
But Harrison, to get back to your question, I don't think comedy could save the world. I don't think the idea that, Mad's not around and that's why, I mean, there's more satire in comedy now than ever before. Mad used to be pretty much the only brand doing what it was doing. It wasn't even a brand. The thought of it as a brand. It influenced all this comedy. The Mad voice is ubiquitous now in advertising and humor, and there's non-man humor too. There's no shortage of pointed satire that's effective, that's great. There are a lot of great people out there working, but what that has to do with who the next president is, we've already found out that comedians don't get to choose. Who's the next
But I
president?
will say this. I started reading Mad when I was, I don't know, 11, 12 years old. And I've heard this story from so many people. When you first got your first copy of Mad, you couldn't believe what you were reading. That there was this thing of people making fun of your teachers and your parents, and you take it in your room and you go, oh my God. And there was like this discovery. And it was a magazine, so you could hold it and you could pore over it, and there was jokes buried in the background. And some jokes you didn't get, but you kind of figured that it were funny, and you'd figure them out later, or you'd ask your older brother. That's gone now. That Mad, unfortunately, is gone forever. And yes, there's still a lot of humor out there, and kids are more jaded, and kids get older earlier now. But I still think there's a place for Mad for that 10 to 12-year-old kid, 13, who's a little bit of a misfit, maybe a little bit awkward, maybe a little bit smart and doesn't realize that that's a good thing yet. And he thinks that he's weird because he's smart. And Mad really spoke to those kids. And I don't think there's anything out there doing that now.
Mm. Yeah.
And as we get towards the end of this interview, I want to make sure that everybody who's watching live, if you have questions for anybody who's here right now, make sure you put them in the comments on YouTube and Facebook, and I'll try to get to as many of them as we possibly can. There's a couple of quotes about what Matt has done, and Matt has literally changed even the legal sphere. I remember when I was working as an intern, we were working on a Banana Republican article, and we were allowed to use photos from Banana Republic, but not from J. Crew, because that we could only use photos from the thing that we were parodying.
Right.
But what are when you think about like where Mad has its place and at a place like the National Comedy Center, what are some of the other lasting things that you think Mad's legacy represents?
Well, one of them is certainly the famous lawsuit that Irving Berlin sued Mad because we had put in lyrics to some of his songs. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, which declined to hear it, so the appellate court ruling stood. And the judge was Julius Kaufman, who also sent the Rosenbergs to the chair. So he has two famous decisions. The Rosenbergs and Mad, I don't know what that means exactly. But he wrote, Mr. Berlin, you do not own iambic pentameter. And if I ruled in your favor, every time somebody warbles one of your songs in the shower, they're going to have to mail you a 25-cent check. And that really became the standard for being able to parody songs. And one thing that was critical was we did not print the music with the lyrics. So we only printed just the lyrics, and it was in the person's head, and they had to bring the tune to it. And that became a very famous case.
Mad was never successfully sued, as far as I know. I believe that once, I don't remember the woman's name, but there was this weird thing that there was we had funny names in Mad all the time or something, and maybe one of you guys remember the name. So there was like, we made a joke about Hecky Peckersmith and Grand Rapids, and Grand Rapids, wherever Grand Rapids is. Where's Grand Rapids? Someone tell me. Whatever. It turns out there was a Hecky Peckersmith from Grand Rapids.
It was actually a woman, and she did sue.
She sued.
And it was basically...
Was there a phone number? There was
well, Sam had that on his wall.
There was a
whole
Don phone number.
It was a woman.
Like graffiti. It was a working phone number. I didn't know if it was the same.
No, that's the Don. It was an old couple that,
and Gaines settled, right? John, am I right that Bill settled?
Bill didn't. She was going to lose, but in the deposition, she was so upset. She felt that she had been held up to mockery. And she was like a 16-year-old girl. It was up in Massachusetts. I forgot her name. But it was just an odd coincidence that there was a girl by this name that went to this high school that we totally made up. He felt so badly for her that he gave her $10,000, something like that, just because, even though he didn't have to. But that was, I think, the only time we ever paid out on anything.
Which for Gaines is the equivalent of like $10 million.
Exactly, yeah.
And that girl...
Trip to Haiti.
Tom Bolin wrote in and said, Sam, what was your favorite cover?
I'll take this one, Sam.
I will tell you the first one that comes to mind. I mean, because I did a few covers myself, but probably my experience with covers was more as art director, working with our cover artists primarily over the last 10 to 15 years with Mark Fredrickson, who became our go-to guy, kind of the Norman Mingo of the 21st century. And the cover that stands out most, I'll be honest, the first one I thought of was the one with Alfred as a hobo that says, "We'll worry for food." I thought was just a great cover and extremely well realized by Mark. But the one that I think I was happiest because it was an idea that John came up with, and the cover process was really difficult. They were talking about meetings before, and the worst meetings of all were cover meetings because, with the rare exception of a cover that just sprang to life, very often it would be meeting after meeting after meeting, all day meetings that would last for days and sometimes weeks until we finally came up with something. And this was an idea John had. He did a little stick figure thing on a piece of yellow paper, and I took it in. I think I first did a doodle, a sketch, and then I kind of did a comp in Photoshop. And I don't know, there was a point where I think John didn't want to go with it, but I just kept pushing because to me it was just a brilliant idea.
What is it? What is it?
I have it, Harrison, but it was the oil slick cover. And if you remember when the Gulf of Mexico was just covered in oil, and the idea was that 80% of the cover was just this water filled with oil, with Alfred in the bottom corner sunning himself, and it was, Alfred was that big, and I just loved it, and I don't know if it was that John learned to love it or if he just said, "Oh, I can't fight with Sam anymore in this one," and we gave it to Fredrickson, and he ended up going berserk on this because I was on the phone with him about 12 times a day because he kept making minor changes as he was working on it, and he'd send it to me, and at some point you couldn't tell the difference. The changes were so minuscule, and finally we said, "Mark, this is it. It's brilliant." It was a Friday afternoon, and we put it to bed. We sent it to the printer, and Monday morning he called me. He says, "Can I make another change?"
But it was a major change. He changed the entire water, remember? And it looked in
several times.
No, completely different. And he was right. I mean, Mark is
it was an ocean
genius beyond belief.
It was literally
it turned out to be a really great cover. Yeah.
Yeah, Fredrickson is so talented but so fastidious about, it's like photorealistic caricature. Oh, that perfect.
There it is. I was hunting for it. I know I had it in my files.
Yeah, I remember him sending in ones where it was like kind of brownish, and he was like, "Yeah, but the way the light would hit it." I mean, he was really working his brain on it, and it's an okay cover.
Dave, is there an article that you're most proud of? Is there a certain thing that you point to?
I liked the ones. I did a couple that were like I did a Scholastic Book Fair.
Great.
That was just. I feel like I got to use a different voice. Like I feel like it was. I don't know. It was just big. It was a lot of fun, and it had a lot of kind of weird jokes because it was so big. I like that.
Dave, do you remember the joke that you wrote that you said you're probably going to burn in hell for? In that?
Oh yeah, it was about I forget how. It was a book. It was Scholastic, so it was like kids' book order form, and it was like the tale of Hitler is told by his pet schnauzer Schnitzel. I think. It was about the Holocaust, but it was told through like this puppy.
Nice.
And again, like that's a ton of work for the art department, and it looks great. It looks like the Scholastic thing, and it's also like 50 jokes that are made legible and not like a nightmare because the art department was very, very good at what they did.
Bad taste is timeless, Dave.
What's up?
Bad taste is timeless.
That's true.
Jim Gordon wrote in. He said, "What is your favorite TV or movie parody?" So, Joe, do you want to take this?
That's a better question for Sam.
Okay, yeah, sure.
I mean, for the movie or TV parody, there are a bunch I could mention. I'll just say when I was a kid, it would probably be the Guru of Ours, the spoof of the Wizard of Oz that Mad did in the late 60s. We're off to dig the guru, the greedy old guru of ours. The things he's got are better than pot and full with fantastic powers. If you want to spin like a UFO, the guru of ours will make it so. We know. You're mine. Whatever. At Howard Johnson's eating, you'll find me there repeating these jokes no one can bear. At tall buildings, I am gaping because there just ain't no escaping that I'm nothing but a square. I remember this stuff from when I was 12, so that I really loved the song parodies, especially when they were embedded in the movie parodies that Man did.
Joe, can I answer a personal point here? Can you do a little Hello Deli?
Hello Deli?
Yeah.
I don't know that I remember Hello Deli. Was it when you please bring me a nice corned beef on? I don't remember Hello Deli. I'm sorry.
That's too bad. You used to kill me with that.
Hello Deli?
Yeah.
I don't remember doing Hello Deli. I remember doing MG, I just love to touch you. When I double clutch you, MG, it gives me a thrill. I knew all of Frank Jacobs' songs. And actually, when we went on a trip with Frank, and he didn't know me, we in Switzerland, I cornered him in the bar. And I just sat down next to him, and I said, Frank, war helps to keep the population down. War means less people in a crowded town. Yes, war lets us try our new artillery. Yes, war gives our soldiers foreign trips for free. Yes, war helps the USO, and war brings a Bob Hope show, and war brings us much enjoyment, and it cuts down unemployment. I just started singing his own stuff to him. And he didn't even remember it, but he remembered it enough to know that he wrote it, And there was this kid in front of him who knew all of it. So
he might have remembered it better if you'd sung it on tune.
Anyway, I saw this, and the question was, what's your favorite TV parody? And as I said before hogging the conversation, it's really a question for Sam, right?
But, it's a very difficult question because I tend to relate more to the art than to the writing. I mean, obviously, the better the writing, the better the art. This is something I knew as a practitioner and also as a fan and an art director, that if you gave them a great script, you were going to get much better art than if you gave them a so-so script. But obviously, the master of all this was Mort Drucker. And about 8 years ago, we put together a Mort Drucker book, and I went through everything Mort had done for the magazine, which was like 25,000 pages. That's not the book.
That's an old Mort Drucker book.
That is the Mort Drucker book. So, and we had to cut down to 250 pages. So we had to basically take like 1% of what he had. I made choices that involved, okay, we want to have a certain amount of the ones everybody remembers, like The Godfather or the Batman or the Superman movies. And I picked up some odd ones and also political stuff, because Mort did a lot of political stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I could name off top. I mean, I loved Hannah and Her Sisters. I loved True Grit, and I loved Bonanza, which was an early one he did. And there was one that he did that I had to throw in. I'm trying to remember what it was, because the splash was just so magnificent. And I said, people have to see this again.
Was it the 18?
No.
The 18 was great.
It was Stand By Me.
Oh, yeah.
The splash of Stand By Me, just wonderful. And everybody has their own picks, and usually, and this is what we say about Mad in general, which is Mad was always at its absolute best whenever it was you discovered it. So whenever you were 12 years old and you first laid your eyes on Mad, that was the best issue of Mad ever. But I still go back to some of the really early stuff, and even obscure movies. Like Mort drew a parody of the movie The Group, which was about Vassar co-eds in the 50s. With Candice Bergen and Joan Hackett. But it was so beautifully realized. That didn't matter how good or bad the movie was. What he did was wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I'd never seen the MacGyver show, but going through my dad's old mads, there was a one panel where he smashes up a wristwatch in order to reconfigure the parts into a sundial so he can tell what time it is, and it killed me. We have a great question. This is I'll give this one to John. It is from Desmond Devlin, and it says, "Who was the second greatest talent you have ever worked with after Desmond Devlin?"
Who could I pick? I would have to
You can't say Desmond Devlin.
I'd have to say Desmond's talent was so great, he's number one and number two.
There you go.
We're wrapping this thing up. I could do this forever. But I guess when the Mad offices closed and that chapter of history was complete, was there anything you guys took from that office that you treasure in particular?
I took about 80 rolls of Scotch tape. And I was in Staples. That's like $4 a roll. I'm gold. I'm never going to use it up. I'm golden.
That's very Gainesian of you.
I can tell you, the West Coast didn't get any of the T-shirts.
I actually left more than I took with me. I had amassed so many things in the bookcases because we kept getting comic books and books about comic books every week from DC, and I'd put them in the bookcase. And we left. I said, I had nowhere to put any of this stuff, so it was left there, and I assume ended up in a dumpster somewhere.
Go.
When Bill Gaines died, I asked Danny Gaines for Bill's shoes, and he used to wear those big desert boots, and I had them bronzed, and I had them in my office, and I took them home, and that's one of my treasured possessions from the Mad offices. I
don't have a shoe, but here right above my desk, I have a Bill Gaines business card.
Oh, cool.
And he gave that to me too.
I mean, that's cool. Since we're talking about the end days, I'll say this because it needs to be said. The idea that you were going to close down Mad in New York City, where it had been for 60 years, relocate it to Burbank with an entire new staff, without a single person on the staff who had ever written an article for Mad, is, boy, when you talk about a bad and ill-advised decision, it's hard to think of one in the comedy world worse than that. Movie Mad without anybody. Well, that's when I ran for Pope. So,
you mentioned, you said, well, it could be a more ill-advised decision. And so I completed that phrase with this.
Thank you. I think that we all kind of had, listen, we all love Mad, and we were sad to see Mad go west, and I think we all wanted it to succeed. And the idea that it's kind of gone now, I mean, it still publishes something, it reprints or whatever. Yeah, that's not a good feeling for me. It's like the college you used to go to went out of business or something, because their students. I don't know. I'm trying. I don't have quite the analogy anymore. But there were 550 issues of Mad. They didn't get to issue 12. When they renumbered it. I mean, the whole thing just crumbled, and it crumbled because they didn't think it out. And listen, Sam and Dave were on tour years ago with neither Sam nor Dave.
Not me, not us.
All right. So, this is just, it couldn't be Mad. And ironically, it turns out the last of the Mad impersonators turned out to be Mad itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe and I were talking about it, and we always said we didn't want to be at Mad for the last issue. We didn't want to have our name on the mastheads. We didn't want that. So we were happy with it. All right, they're going to move it out west. We weren't happy about that. All right, they're going to make a go of it. But seeing what it became, there's a part of us now that wish that DC had just ended it at 550.
Right. Harrison, earlier you were talking about the Mad voice. And I don't know that you could actually put into words what the Mad voice was. But the fact is, you've got four people here that together come to about 120 years of working at MAD. And when, three of us came aboard, Bill Gaines was still alive, and Nick Meglin, who was with Matt for 50 years, was still around. And the fact is, that's how you know the voice, because you're part of it. You learn from the people who were there before you, and you build on that legacy. So when they closed down the New York office, I don't have anything bad to say about the people that took over, except they didn't know what they were doing, because they weren't part of it for so long, and they didn't learn from the people who preceded them. So they created essentially an entirely new magazine, had bits and pieces that were taken from what we did, but they didn't understand that voice because they weren't part of it.
I think that leads us to a perfect final question. One of the things that happens at the National Comedy Center is you learn about comedy. And I think if you're a young comedian or performer, it's a really great place to be inspired and to see how you're connected to the greater history of comedy. But if there's a young comedy writer or comedian who's watching, what advice would you give them based on all the experience that you guys have? Let's go from youngest to oldest. So we'll start with Dave.
Oh, learn a trade. Plumbing. Everyone needs plumbing. No, I mean, if you want to do it, just write. Start writing. Start watching and reading a lot of different stuff. If you want to write, especially read a lot of comedy, because it's a different animal to surprise someone in print than it is to surprise them. But either way, just watch a bunch of stuff. If you love it, it's not hard. It's not work. And do it. Stay in school, kids.
We'll go reverse chronicle order of working at MAD. So Sam,
well,
illustrator or artist.
But what I was going to say is, Harrison, you probably know as well as anyone that what you do now, even though it builds on stuff that you learned at MAD, isn't the same as what we did at MAD. The stand-up comedy is not the same as writing for the printed page. And part of the problem now, whether it's for writers or editors or illustrators, is there's not much printed page left. And so the avenues are different, which means that the voice is different, the beats are different, the way you manifest the humor. I mean, humor is humor. But I guess the only thing I can say to anybody is good luck.
Well, I can tell you without MAD or the internship, I would not be anywhere near where I am now. And I always look at MAD as sort of, when people ask, how did you get started in comedy? I was interested in comedy, but being an intern and sort of getting to learn from you guys and sort of being in that comedy boot camp, so to speak. I mean, you guys were literally working over my shoulder while I was writing stuff. And I couldn't thank you enough. I wish I still had this body. But yeah, the Harrison then had no idea what he was in for, and he also didn't know that his there was a pandemic coming, because if he did, he should have warned somebody. But Joe, what advice would you have for a young comedy writer or comedian?
I am reminded of when I met Buddy Hackett. It was 6 years from the time I graduated college to the time I first worked in comedy. It was 6 years, 10 months, and 9 days. I was pretty much a failure at everything I was doing as a stand-up and as a comedy writer. I was driving a taxi cab. One night, Penn Station on Friday night, Buddy Hackett walks off the escalator and gets into the back of my car. Now, Buddy Hackett lived on Roosevelt Island. So that's quite a ways from Penn Station. He was in my car for about 35 or 40 minutes. And he was returning from Vegas. He didn't fly. He'd taken the train back from Vegas. And I remember the commercials were on late night TV then. See Buddy Hackett and Sandy Hackett at the Sahara. So I used to carry my comedy material around with me. Charlie and I were doing radio. We had a company called Steel Belted Radio. I had scripts. Buddy Hackett's in my car. So Buddy, I got to tell you, I'm a comedy writer. Here's my stuff. I got to take a look at my stuff. And Hackett says, I don't give it to me. He says, I can't help you. I said, what do you mean you can't help me? You're Buddy Hackett. He said, I can't help you because I can only help you if I was hiring someone. And I'm not hiring anybody because I write for myself. So I like working alone, so I can't help you. So then I popped the question that you're asking. I said to him, well, I got to ask you something then. How does someone break into this business whose name isn't Sandy Hackett? And I thought that was a pretty bold question, given that his son was performing with him. Here is what the comedy sage Buddy Hackett said to me. He said,
Oh, fuck yourself.
You're a droll son of a bitch, Dave. You still got it.
The only driver to ever be thrown out of a moving car.
Hackett says to me, you have to love comedy so much that you're willing to do it for no money and no recognition and no satisfaction. And if you're willing to do it for no money, no recognition, and no satisfaction, I think that comedy may be a very good business for you. And if not, get out now.
I love it. And you did. And you did. And you worked for no money, no recognition.
Right. Got out of the business. Went to work for me.
That's right.
John, you have the final word. What advice would you have for somebody who's trying to get into comedy now?
You know, steal from good people. I think it's very, very difficult. Certainly, if someone wanted to get into comedy now, I'd say don't bother with print because there's no markets and you're not going to make any money. I would go to California or New York, one or the other, and I would just bang away at television, and I would save every dime that I made because by 35, 38, you are a has-been. And they're looking for the next kid to come out that's banging at their door. It's a very, we were talked about this.
I'm so glad we can end this on such a positive, uplifting.
We were extraordinarily lucky. We worked until like our 60s in comedy. Nobody works in their 60s in comedy, unless Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, somebody like that. We were extremely, extremely lucky. And I don't know if the luck is out there now these days for most people.
I'll say this, right? Someone's going to do it. And if you want to do it, if it's what you love, you don't know where it's going to take you. You might start writing and realize, oh, I like writing plays, or I like writing ad copy, or I like producing movies. No one's going to give you a crystal ball prediction no matter what field you go into. So, you're going to have to roll the dice. It's always hard. And whatever, you're not guaranteed a gold watch and a pension from any job ever. So if it's a thing...
Actually, that's not, I think that Tourneau guarantees you that. But
are they hiring?
And remember, as someone here can attest to, it doesn't hurt to learn magic.
That's right. It comes in handy, especially on Mondays. I think that's the best day for it.
So you have something to fall back on.
Right.
That's right. People always said, did you have a day job before you really got successful in comedy? And I said, magic. That was the day job.
I'm telling you.
There's always a bar mitzvah. There's always some bar mitzvah.
Hey, before we sign off, I just want to say, we were here and we were part of the second generation, but a lot of people came before us in MAD. And a lot of people were still working at MAD when it virtually ended. Especially like the people from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. We stood on their balls to get where we are. So I want to give a shout out to them and the people who were with us at the end who now are scrambling.
Right.
No, that's awesome. Guys, I can't thank you enough for what you've done in my life. I would not be here doing what I'm doing without you guys. And for joining us today here with this conversation presented by a National Comedy Center. John, Joe, Sam, and Dave, thank you so much. Stay safe and stay well, and hopefully talk to you guys soon.
Bye, Harrison. Are we getting
Thanks
paid
a lot.
for this?
Thanks, Harrison. I'm glad no one can see this.
You guys were breaking up. I didn't hear any of that. So I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much, man. A huge thanks to Joe, John, Sam, and Dave, and everybody at the National Comedy Center as well. Thank you for continuing to tell the story of comedy. You can still pick up a ton of great mad stuff wherever fine books are not sold. You can follow me on social media if you'd like, at Harrison Comedy, and the National Comedy Center at NTL Comedy Center. This program was produced by the National Comedy Center, the nation's official cultural institution and museum dedicated to the art of comedy, located in Jamestown, New York. We hope you'll support the nonprofit National Comedy Center and its work to present and preserve the vital story of comedy by making a donation or becoming a member today. My name is Harrison Greenbaum. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy the rest of the festival. Take care, everybody, and good night.